Hey there, it's me Eden. Welcome to Crossdressing Adventure Stories. Today I'm going to share with you cross-dressing adventure stories called Office Colleague Caught Me in Airport, Part 10. So, if you're new to the channel, then please consider subscribing and be a part of our inclusive community. It didn't take long before he spotted Martina and looked at her several times. Then he spoke briefly to his colleagues and came over to her. "Good evening. Ms. Seymour, right?" Martina nodded embarrassedly. "Good evening, Mr. Scholes." She could feel herself blushing under her makeup and hoped it wouldn't show underneath. "May I ask you to join us at the table? Then I can introduce you to my colleagues." "You already know Mr. Volant." Martina hesitated. "Yes, I know Mr. Volant. And do you really think I should come to them?" "I mean, that's exactly why." She pointed to her dress. Mr. Scholes smiled at her. "Ms. Seymour, while it's surprising to meet you here now as a woman, there's certainly a reason for it. I also assume that tomorrow you will appear as a woman, so it is perfectly okay to get to know your colleagues today. Or is this just a trip to the opposite sex today?" Martina's thoughts shot wildly. Should she act like she was now, or should she rather play the man as previously thought? Without further ado, she got up, took her plate and followed Mr. Scholes to his colleagues. "So, here we are. May I introduce Mrs. Seymour? She is our contact on the supplier side and worked closely with us during European rollout. You know Mr. Volant already. Here on the left, it's Mr. Vandenberg, our North American Senior Vice President IT, and on the right hand, it's Mr. Michaels, Head of IT Operations. Both gentlemen are responsible for the US rollout of our common contract." Mr. Scholes introduced his American colleagues. Martina shook hands with everyone. She paid close attention to Mr. Volant's reaction, but he gave her a very friendly smile. She sat down and they got straight to the subject of the next day's appointment. At some point, however, one of the American gentlemen asked, "May I ask you something more personal? We were announced to Mr. Seymour. I assume that's you as well. Am I right?" Martina was now embarrassed and nodded cautiously. But that was the end of the matter, and during the meal they talked more about hobbies and leisure activities. The next morning Martina got ready as a woman again. She was now so well known to the customer. The workshop also ran perfectly and was a complete success. Martina convinced the customer's American representatives so much that Mr. Vandenberg commissioned her with the entire project management for the US connection. When saying goodbye, he then spoke privately about Martina's transgender identity. "When I saw you for the first time, I was astonished. You were not born as a woman. You changed my view on transgender, as I was a little reluctant before. I could not understand why a man wanted to be a woman before, as in most of the cases I saw, the one obviously remained a man. You are totally different. Your charisma, your behavior, and your look are fully feminine. I must admit, you impressed me heavily." Martina became very embarrassed. "I suggest you will lead the project as Martina as well, correct?" he asked further. Martina looked at him and then nodded. He then smiled at her and seemed satisfied. Since she would not be traveling back until the next day, Martina allowed herself a little more time in various shopping malls. When she got ready for the dress and heels the next day, she didn't think at all that she still had to go through American passport control. It wasn't until she got to the airport, after she'd easily checked in her suitcase at the counter, that it occurred to her that her outfit didn't even remotely match the gender on her passport. She got a little nervous when she first approached security. But she didn't have any problems there. She was very surprised that there were almost no further exit controls. Even when boarding, the lady from the ground staff only looked back and forth twice between the boarding pass and her face, but then she smiled friendly at Martina and led her on board. During the flight, she chatted animatedly with her seat neighbor, who apparently did not recognize Martina's actual gender. At some point Martina was on her own again and took her tablet out of her pocket. Before the trip she had secured a lot of information about the necessary steps for a gender reassignment there and now began to read. In between, she kept making notes and wondering if she really wanted to live only as a woman. At the moment she was incredibly happy, and with Astrid by her side, she hoped that it would stay that way for a long time. When she got the detailed information about the gender reassignment surgeries, the person seated next to her noticed it. "Excuse me, but who are you looking for gender reassignment information for?" asked Martina's neighbor. Martina answered a little embarrassed, "For me." "I hope I'm not offending you with that." With a friendly smile, the woman shook her head, "No, absolutely not. I just didn't realize you were biologically a man. They look so completely feminine that hardly anyone would assume they are transgender on their own. May I introduce myself? Dr. Sabine Heinrich, psychologist from Hamburg." Martina was amazed. "And trans identity is one of my specialties," added Martina's neighbor. "May I ask how far along you are in the process?" she asked further. Martina had to think about something. "I don't even know if I want to go down this path completely. So far I've been quite content with being a crossdresser. But for a few weeks I have been located in my environment and my new girlfriend is pushing me to be a woman more often. She got me thinking about becoming a full woman. I'm in the process of finding out about it now. But I haven't decided yet, even though I currently live almost exclusively as a woman. I haven't had any problems with it in Germany so far, and it wasn't an issue when I was in the USA either. Even at my clients, the American colleagues accepted my behavior without reservation. That was my biggest concern initially, even if it was more of a coincidence. I had dinner en femme the night before my first appointment and my contacts all came to the same restaurant together. I already knew two of the gentlemen from the European project and they recognized me straight away. As a result, they invited me to their table and introduced me as a woman to the American colleagues. Only briefly did I get asked if I was the announced man at the same time, so to speak. I was a bit embarrassed to say yes, but nods were accepted with a friendly smile. Martina paused. Dr. Heinrich smiled at her, "Honestly, as naturally feminine as you appear, you can't help it." After just a few moments, everyone had probably forgotten that you're not a biological woman. You can believe me, I definitely have experience with transgender people and have rarely seen anyone who is so convincingly female, without any hormonal therapy, surgery, or coaching. So I can understand that you are thinking of continuing down this path. You were just talking about your girlfriend. How does she feel about that? Martina thought of Astrid. It would be just right for her if Martina would continue on this path and at least be able to do the breast surgery at some point. Astrid is already trying to push me in that direction. We got together because she got to know my feminine side. Without her I would probably still be just a secret tranny. Although I was out and about in public en femme, just not where I could be recognized. A few weeks ago I was traveling as Martina and Astrid saw me changing planes in Amsterdam and recognized me. She also spoke to me straight away and in the days that followed made me make my feminine side clearer. I've started to put on light makeup even in my male existence. Then the clothes in the office became more and more feminine, even if I still didn't wear skirts or dresses or higher pumps. After a weekend together, during which I was completely a woman, she used a little ruse to get me to go to the office fully dressed. Surprisingly, there were almost only positive reactions there too, Martina told her story. Since then I've been almost exclusively Martina in the office and accepted as such. Dr. Heinrich listened attentively. I hear your girlfriend is a bit more of a driving force. Do you also want the transformation or would you only do it for your wife? Dr. Heinrich answered the question as directly as it already haunted Martina's head. Martina needed some time before she could answer. On the one hand, I feel much more comfortable in the female role than in the male one, and the idea of having my own breasts at some point and being able to do without silicone prostheses is very appealing. But on the other hand, I'm very happy with the status quo. I can live as I want and don't necessarily have to transform myself into a woman forever. I would prefer to have a way in between. I would finally get rid of body hair and have my own breasts, but otherwise nothing would change. Martina's seatmate smiled. She heard this wish more often, and to a certain point she could also understand it. From her point of view, however, there was only one: either completely or not at all. Excuse me if I tell you this so openly, but this will not work in the long run. When you start the path, there is no point in stopping halfway. This will not satisfy you in the long run and will probably make you even more unhappy. You will see that as soon as you start hormone therapy, the desire to become a fully woman physically will increase. Then she asked Martina about her childhood and youth. Martina readily shared how, even as a little boy, she envied the girls around her for their chic dresses. The trigger for slipping into female clothes came with Martina's first girlfriend. She once put her boyfriend in a short summer dress just for fun. Of course, Martina also wore underwear from her girlfriend at the time and a pair of patent leather ballerinas. After that, Martina secretly tried on things from her mother's wardrobe, and she really enjoyed the feeling of the light fabric stroking her legs. After she moved out, she bought her own things until she met her wife. Martina disposed of the women's things, but after a short time the desire was there again. Martina secretly began to wear high heels and skirts again. At some point the marriage broke up, although Martina's second self was never discovered by her wife. After the breakup, Martina went on a shopping spree, and just a few weeks after the breakup, her wardrobe contained more women's clothing than men's clothing. In every free minute, Martin turned into Martina. She practiced different makeup techniques for a long time until she was reasonably satisfied. But only now that she was putting on her makeup every day, it was easy for her and she no longer looked like a drag queen. Martina had also normalized her style of clothing. In the early days, her outfits were still very thrown together and the skirts and dresses were much too short. In the meantime, she only wore these extreme minis in exceptional cases, when she wanted to turn Astrid on. Otherwise, Martina still mostly wore skirts or dresses, which were allowed to be short but no longer looked vulgar. Dr. Heinrich took notes all the time. When Martina had finished, she just nodded. And? Am I more of a standard case or an exception? Martina asked. Dr. Heinrich smiled at her. Somewhere in between. You had contact with the topic early on, but you only became really aware of it later, and, as I can gather from your stories, it still hasn't fully penetrated your consciousness. Martina looked at her in astonishment. Well, you're enjoying your dual gender identity right now, but you can't really choose sides. Sooner or later this will be a problem for you, but also for those around you. What do your parents actually say about this? Explained and asked Dr. Heinrich. Martina became a little melancholy at the thought of her parents. Her mother had died 3 years ago and her father about 7 months ago. But Martina's mother must have suspected something, because shortly before her death she told Martina that she should finally come out of her shell and be happy. At that time, Martina's marriage was already in trouble and Martina used every business trip as an opportunity to break out of the role of husband. Even if her mother couldn't know anything about it, she seemed to suspect that Martina wanted to live differently even then. Smiled again. Dr. Heinrich knew when Martina was still telling it. Even your mother could see inside you better than you could, she commented. That was something Martina knew but didn't want to admit before. Dr. Heinrich gave Martina her card. Please get in touch with me, I would like to accompany you on your way. Martina accepted the business card and thanked her. For the rest of the flight, Martina gets busy with her documents or sleeps a bit. That's all for today. See you in the next video. Till then, take care. Oh yes, please like and subscribe to my channel. And also share your feedback, it really means a lot to me.